So fun to do this lecture. I had actually started this, believe it or not, 2015. And this is how long it's been getting this research together for this. And even after 7 years, there still isn't a lot that we've been able to find, but it's exciting. So, just to start off, I need to ask Laura Mulberg to please stand for a second. I just want to thank Laura, who was so instrumental. We got the Wilmington Journal, which was on old microfilm that you could see at the library, in those gigantic, what were those machines called anyway?
Microfiche readers?
Yes, so we got, through Laura's help, that reel went to UC Riverside, where they have their digital newspaper collection, and it has been scanned. So the Wilmington Journal, Phineas's own newspaper, has now been scanned, and it is online to review. There are some fantastic finds in this. So if you get a chance, it's newspapers.com is the one that is the better site of two. There is a charge for that. There is a user fee. It's very minimal. Now, if you go to UC Riverside, their digital newspaper collection, that's free, and it's on both sites. But the newspaper.com actually is a better database because it is nationwide. The UC Riverside is just California, but there's still great ones to take a look at.
But both of them have the same Wilmington Journal.
They do.
And they're both user-friendly or equally user-friendly?
They're friendly. Let's just
Okay, all right.
say. Yes, Vince.
Do we look under Wilmington Journal?
I'm sorry?
Do we look under Wilmington Journal when we get to the site?
You've got a ton of different newspapers to look at, but they're all listed, and you can scroll down to Wilmington Journal. But there's a lot of newspapers in Los Angeles at the time that they have online, and it's just becoming a great source. And this is something we didn't have back in 2015. So all of this information keeps coming at us, which is great.
Bravo! Thank you, Laura!
So, to begin with, see, it has been so long, Selena and I were both like, how does this work? All right, so the first piece of this puzzle came to me with the help of one of our interns many years back, 2015. If you guys remember, Lupe was here.
Yes.
Lupe did great work for us. And one of them was to actually go through the Wilmington Journal, buy a microfilm reader, and went page by page by page, had it printed out so we had a hard copy, which was just crazy. But in that, there was an article, a small little tidbit about Charlie Stone Apache Banning. And I went, who in the world is Charlie Stone Apache Banning? Well, it turns out he was a little boy that had been captured by the Apaches, and he was rescued from them by the Pima Indians. And he was brought to Tucson as an orphan and made his way to Wilmington through Charlieville Stone, which I didn't understand that until I started looking through all of the newspaper accounts. And I looked up, well, who is this guy? And we found him. He was in charge of the Union Wagon Factory in Wilmington that made our stagecoach.
Coaches.
And he was also a blacksmith. And he transferred his business from the Union Wagon Factory over to Tucson. So this little boy stayed with Mr. Stone, William Stone. And you can see his name at the very bottom of the ad there. I'm sorry, this is my laser pointer today. So he's right here, William Stone. So anyway, that article led to, wow, what else does this journal have and other things? So one of the things that we came across was an article from 1868 And this article was done in the end of September, and the article stated, I partook of the general's hospitality, but the mansion appeared rather gloomy in its half-furnished and mistressless condition. His children are away, and he stays in it but seldom. Well, that's really an eye-opener, because when we go back and look at books that are written about Banning, the very few that we have, of course, we look at our training manual, and we look up what happened. Why would the children be away? What is going on? So all of that is just registering in my head. And we had to look back. We had to start working our way backwards to find out what happened, right? So, of course, where are the children? That was the big one. Have they moved? I mean, what happened? So as we backtracked, we found in the newspaper April 17th. So we go back 5 months from this gentleman's article from September. And it states on the passenger list, because when you do these searches and you just type in Banning or Banning and children, Banning's children, all of these little clues, the database searches, and it hit on the passenger list for April 17th, 1868, that a Miss Elliott and Banning's children are on a steamer. Who is Miss Elliott? So that was the first one, right? So that began the quest of figuring out where are these kids going and who is Miss Elliott and what is happening right now. By the way, it is so nice to finally have a Rebecca Banning image
I agree.
that we can use here. So what is happening in 1868, of course? Well, it's both political and personal for Phineas Banning, and of course personal. It is the death of Rebecca in early 68, and she had also lost Bessie in 1866, which was her second and final daughter. She had lost her. 2 years later, she's going to give birth to Vincent, close to, we believe, January 4th, January 3rd. She passes on January 7th, which is a few days after, and it's a little complicated with the records figuring out exactly, but we know when this is happening. And with that, and Rebecca dying soon after, Phineas is up against what is he gonna do, right? So in our minds we know he is, the fight of his life politically was trying to get the railroad bills, the 2 bills he's got in, passed, and then build the railroad. But he's also got the dilemma at home of he now has 4 sons, no wife, and what is gonna happen? How is this gonna go forward, right? Well, luckily, during this time, he has Hannah Sanford, which was Rebecca's mother. Mm-hmm. And Hannah is living here at the time. And Hannah is probably, all probability, taking care of all 4 of them right now. And William is 10, Joseph is 7, and Hancock is 3, and of course Vincent being the newborn. Well, for Phineas, on the other side of all of that sorrow that has happened in early 68, remember he was elected in 1866 as a state senator, as a Union candidate, and who knows, remember, Union candidate is now the Republican Party, but back then they were referred to as, the ticket was the Union ticket. So he's elected in 66, and he is elected, back then they had it structured, you were elected for 2 terms with 1 election. So this meant you served from 66 and then again in 68. So that was the big thing for Phineas, is to get this done. And his second term was crucial because The first term that he was in office, he submitted his 2 railroad bills and they were just stalled. They stalled it. They put it in a committee and it never got the light of day. So his second term, he knew that these bills had to pass, so the pressure was on because this was his final term. He couldn't get this done. Who knows how long this is gonna take. So, the second term began on December 6th, 1867. And this would conclude on March 13th, 1868. This gave him 120 days to get his legislation passed. Now you look on the calendar, you know, this is 120 days that it's in session. It's not exactly calendar 120 days. So he's got to work hard and work fast with this. So Banning, of course, well, he's home. It starts December 6th. He's back home for the holidays. And Rebecca, of course, is 9 months pregnant and is gonna have the baby. Loses the baby, like we talked about, loses her life, on the 7th. And Phineas is back in Sacramento on the 9th. So there is no time for him to mourn. He is back in Sacramento literally 2 days later. The steamers that go back and forth from Wilmington to San Francisco takes them 2 days. So Rebecca dies and he leaves, which has to be just heartbreaking, and the stress of that, for 3 boys that have now just lost their mother, their father is gone, and what kind of a mental state are you in at that point? Well, Banning is also involved with other committees besides the railroad. And after he introduces the 2 bills, it happens early January. And he leaves his work in a statement in a letter that he is a committee head of roads and highways, swamps and floodlands, and military affairs. And in a letter that he writes to the Senate, he says, he was at his breaking point. He couldn't do it. He had to let everybody know that his attendance in this session is going to be very limited. So he has given his vote to other committee heads, saying that his vote should go along with how the committee works. So this kind of alleviates all the other tension, but he's still got the railroad, and that is his focus. So he is traveling back and forth from Sacramento to Wilmington constantly through the months of January through March. And you can look at these travel passenger lists on the newspapers, and he's always on them. He's always going between Wilmington and San Francisco constantly, back and forth, back and forth. On February 1st, both of his bills, number 33 and 34, are passed. And 33 and 34 were the bills that asked the city of Los Angeles and the county, LA County, to provide funding for these projects, and it passes. So February 28th, the LA and San Pedro Railroad is completed. March 24th, the election in LA County to pass both of these bonds and these bills passes, and this is March 24th. So on April 3rd of 1868, the supervisors approved the plan for both LA and LA County, and the railroad is given a date of January 1st, 1870 to be completed. So this gives him literally just about a little more than 1 year to get the rail line between Wilmington and Los Angeles completed. You know, today, even an environmental impact report on most projects takes years.
Yep.
But this has to be done in 1 year, and those are the conditions set.
They have to do reports.
Oh, there's Phineas, I'm sorry, I forgot to move it. So here are the passenger lists, right? So everything is passed on April 3rd, and there we go on April 17th, right after. And it's listing, let me get my laser pointer. So on this list, you gotta really scroll down and find it, but there they are. Miss A. Elliott and 3 children of P. Bannon are now on a ship heading to San Francisco.
What date is that again?
April 17th. And this is just 14 days after Phineas's completion of getting the railroad legislation passed. And now the children are gone. They're going. They're going with a Miss Elliott. So on April 22nd, another newspaper passenger list is printed. And it says passengers for the Daily Alta, which is the newspaper, show Miss A. Elliott and the children heading to Panama. What in the world is going on as my head is spinning as I'm reading this?
Wow.
They're going to Panama. Why Panama? Who's Miss Elliott? So, who is Miss Elliott? Well, Miss Elliott, turns out, is the daughter of Phineas's oldest sister, Elizabeth Alice Banning. She's number 3 of 11 brothers and sisters for Phineas. 11 brothers and sisters. There's a hint for you. And she married Isaac Elliott in 1843, and her daughter's name was Alice. Alice was born in 1844 and is 22 years old in 1868. Phineas's older brother, William Lober Banning, moved to St. Paul in 1855 from Philadelphia. And shortly after that, Elizabeth Alice and William and Elizabeth are side by side in birth. They are just one right after the other. And they both are living on the same block in St. Paul, Minnesota. Their addresses line up to their houses being on the same street. So, if you can imagine, the timing on this is happening so fast. And so who made the decision to take the boys from Wilmington to St. Paul, Minnesota? And to send a 22-year-old by herself from St. Paul by train to New York, and then from New York to Panama, Panama to San Francisco. And this is probably somebody who's never left St. Paul. And now she is on her way to take 3 children back to St. Paul, who she's never met and has only heard about Phineas through her family. So,
Via the Panama
via the Panama
Isthmus.
cross. Remember, and this is going to blow your mind a little. When Phineas comes here in 1851, right, he doesn't have the railroad at Panama. And he actually sees that being constructed on his crossing. Remember, as we were told, he's going by dugout canoe, he's going by mule, whatever means possible to get him across the isthmus. But now it's the train. So it is just a fun ride trying to avoid yellow fever. It's a wonderful experience, except for malaria and yellow fever. So, just to give you a little bit more, there's the 3 boys, and as we talked about, William is down there on the bottom left, Joe is in the middle, and then Hancock is on the right. And it's 10, 7, and 3. These are the ages of the boys that are now, who have probably never left Wilmington either, right? So now you've got Alice, who's never left, the 3 boys in there, and they're gonna be on an adventure of a lifetime. So, just so we're all understanding how this is gonna work. So, leaving New York, up there, coming around, coming through, coming down to Panama, taking the railroad across, and then back up to the west coast. That's the trip. And the railroad, actually, when you get to Panama City, goes all the way through, and you get to the mouth of the Chagres River, which is called Aspen Aspen whale. Now, we know through this ad right here, which is online, we knew what it took. It took 22 days as they're claiming. And if you look on the ship's list up there, if you can read it anyway, one of them says the Montana. And on the passenger listings, it shows that Alice and the three boys are on the Montana. So this ad is just full of wonderful information. 22 days from New York to San Francisco. But you gotta add on, how long is it gonna take her from St. Paul to New York, transferring all the time on rail lines, getting her to New York on time for the steamer, getting on the steamer, getting to Panama, getting across the isthmus without catching yellow fever, and then onto the west coast, catching another ship, and then up to San Francisco, which, by the way, they pass Wilmington all the time. They won't stop at Wilmington. You have to take a ship from Wilmington to San Francisco, because we're not a world port back then. You weren't a recognized destination, right? So, if you look in the small typing that, I won't read all of it, but it's amazing because it talks about the services that you get from this cruise line. And you're met at the dock, you have your luggage brought on board, you will have, the fun one in that is it has a statement for women traveling with children alone. So this is perfect because you actually are paying for, someone is gonna meet you and take care of you from dock to dock and make sure that your luggage is moved and you're limited 100 pounds of luggage, that's it. Dock to dock, and then off you go. They take care of all of you through this. So, 28 days. But when you stop and think, they've left in April. How long did it take to organize this trip? When did they decide and who picked out it was gonna be Alice Elliott? This had to have been a conversation that was going back and forth from Phineas to family in St. Paul, looking for answers, looking for help, and the decision being made to send your children through a really, it looked like such a romantic trip, but when you read the accounts of the dangers that took place on this trip, it's just amazing. But the decision was made, and we have no clue about any of this, right? We don't have letters, we don't have diaries, we don't have anything. But it had to be made, and that decision had to be made pretty quickly after Rebecca died. For them to be able to organize all of this, figure all this out, and have her on a ship by mid-March, because she has a travel time of probably 28 days to get her to San Francisco, back down to Wilmington, meet and be introduced to three boys and Phineas, back on the ship to San Francisco, back on another ship from San Francisco to Panama, cross, back on another ship, and then back into New York, and then make your way back to St. Paul, which is just an incredible journey.
Crazy.
We think, by looking at this, it was 3 months. And these are, remember, three boys who've just lost their mother, separated from their father, and off they go. The record books state for 1868 that 56,923 people made this trip from coast to coast via Panama.
56,000?
56,000.
Wow.
And it's amazing because by 1871, after the Transcontinental Railroad is moving pretty significantly, that number plummets. And the steamship line companies just, they're on their way out. that's the steamship Montana. That's what Miss Elliott and the kids were on. And also another Banning, soon to be Banning family member sailed on this ship also when she went to the East Coast. And I think you guys know who that is.
Must have been Mary.
The test will show. Okay.
Very.
So, on to William Lober Banning, who was Phineas's older brother that he really, I think, those two really connected on so many levels through transportation, through the military, and I think William Lober actually played a big part in getting Alice and the boys over here. But
But he didn't want
one
to-
of the things that William Lober Banning is doing simultaneously with what Phineas is doing is working on his railroad. And this is the Great Lakes and Mississippi Railroad. Excuse me, the Lake Superior and Mississippi Railroad. Remember, Lake Superior and Mississippi Railroad.
That's a hint.
But what could you say to three boys to send them on their way with their world just literally has gone out from under them? Well, one thing that I think happened was a project, was a mission. And that mission involved water. And 1868, William Lober is almost completed with his railroad, and there is an announcement that a locomotive is going to be delivered like they delivered here for us for our railroad. And a ceremony is going to take place. And so in that ceremony, they're made the newspaper, and there is a whole article about this, celebrating this new locomotive. So with that, the article is entitled "Mingling of the Waters." Okay, so here we go. And this takes place on August 8th, 1868. The children have left here with Alice in April. This puts them there probably by end of May. So, in a surprise unveiling of this is the newspaper article, of a new locomotive, it had been named the William L. Banning, and to surprise William didn't know this was dedicated and named for him. Speeches were given honoring William's work and dedication, and a special ceremony took place. You guys recognize that? That's from the general's office. That's the locomotive. So from the article, upon this bottle containing water from the Pacific Ocean were the following words. The initials on the bottle are GPB, General Phineas Banning of LA, a brother of Mr. Banning, presented of this road. The water in this bottle was taken from the Pacific Ocean 10 miles from shore of the Bay of Wilmington. So as a dad, can you imagine what could take the children's mind off of something? Well, it's a project. It's
Deliver the water.
important that this bottle of water gets to St. Paul, Minnesota for your uncle's dedication of a railroad locomotive. That's my theory. It may be something else, but that's my theory. So during the ceremony, 2 goblets half full of water from Lake Superior and the oceans of the Pacific were handed to Miss Ellen Banning. Now this is William's daughter, Ellen, and he marries Frederick Eyre. So that's the connection there. So, excuse me.
Yes, we need some diagrams.
Oh, wait till I get to the Isaac Elliott story.
Oh.
So, anyway, she got handed 2 bottles of water, one from each. And she made the announcement, with the waters of the Pacific in my right hand and the waters of Lake Superior in my left, and invoking the genius of progress to bring together with the iron bonds of two commercial systems of the globe, I dedicate this engine to the use of the LS-MRR, pouring the water together over the engine, and name it the William L. Banning. So this ceremony takes place, she pours the water. And the article even mentions there is a photograph taken of everybody standing on board after the dedication. And that's it, behind us. And
Receipt.
under magnification, and if you ever come to my office, I'm happy to show this to you on the computer. Here, and they're not named, but right in this area here are three boys. I can't say that's William Joseph and Hillcock, but they look to be about
Right.
10, 7, and 3.
Ah.
It doesn't say it's them, there's no listings of them. So, the boys are gonna remain in St. Paul for another 14 months. Unfortunately, we have not yet discovered anything, any letters, any diaries, nothing. And the interesting thing I find about that is Phineas scolded Mary Hollister, remember? That she hadn't written to him more often when he was away. And he really enjoyed the company of his letters. So letters between Phineas and the three boys, I'm sure, were nonstop. But where are they? Well, unfortunately, we haven't found any of those yet. Hopefully we will. But while the boys are away, of course, life goes on at home in Wilmington. And unfortunately, Vincent Edgar Griffin Banning died 6 months later on June 4th. So this was a brother that the three boys would never see again. And this must have been another terrible letter that Phineas had to write to St. Paul, to his family, explaining we've got another death. And that's losing Vincent. Well, Rebecca's mother, Hannah Sanford, after Vincent dies in June, she leaves on January 6th and is gone. And she takes off with her daughter, Merlinda Prather, and they go to Linden, California. And there's no love loss with that separation. It turns out that Hannah sued Phineas many times. May through August, the court dates ran 1870, and the final one in the newspaper said that Hannah finally withdrew her complaint. And when you look at Tom Sitton's words, he talks about that. He believed that Phineas had told Hannah that she was welcome to stay here, but that didn't work out. And so Hannah wasn't happy with that, and so Hannah took him to court. Even, close to 2 years later, they're still fighting with it. So there is no love loss between that. So that ends in August. On September 20th, 1868, ground was officially broken here in town for the Los Angeles and San Pedro Railroad. Construction of this project was kind of divided with William Keller and Phineas, regarding Phineas taking care of the station stops, with Matthew Keller taking care of the line, being able to grade the roads, put the rails down, all of that. So, and again, remember, we're looking at 1 year. 1 year for the test. So, but one of the other things with Phineas during 1869 is, as we move into this, he's constantly on looking for supplies, funds, workmen to get this road done, and it's a constant battle. And it's amazing to look at the newspapers and see all of the harsh, really abusive articles that are written about him regarding the railroad and the funding that they believe was taken, and it just incredible. But Phineas, did not write back and go article to article with people. He proved his point by getting everything done, and got everything done by the deadline, which in today's world, that's few and far between. So, also, 1869, while the children are away, there are several reports of him still entertaining here at home. Grand dinners for the military, which is on its way out of Drum Barracks. And there is never a mention of any family member being here on site. It's just Phineas. It's also stated in the newspapers in 1869 that Phineas has found love again, and that he is pursuing to be remarried. And this takes place in June, but that doesn't happen. And then another announcement says he's found it again, and he's going to get married in August '69, and that doesn't happen again. But we all know he does find Mary, and that interest pursues, and of course that one succeeded. On October 17th, 1869, the passenger list from the Daily Alta, which is the San Francisco newspaper, showed Miss Elliott, Joseph, and Hancock Banning are returning to San Francisco. Doesn't say Williams on there, but I'm sure the names are dropped and taken out, I'm sure. On another passenger list, a few days before, it showed Phineas Banning, Hannah Sanford, and her son Cyrus arriving in San Francisco. They're all coming together, everything put aside to meet the boys. And they're there to welcome the boys. They all come together, right? And this has been 18 months separation from the boys from being at home with their father. I don't know if you can read that, but that's the grave marker for Miss Elliott and her husband. So everyone was back in Wilmington for October 26th, which was the grand celebration for the Los Angeles and San Pedro Railroad. Now, if you think about it, the boys and Miss Elliott saw our railroad open, and they saw the Williams Railroad open, the Lake Superior and Mississippi Railroad. So they got to experience both of those wonderful celebrations. On November 17th is our final finding for Miss Elliott as she was on her way home. So a month later, she's back on a ship for her 4th trip from San Francisco back to New York, back to St. Paul. And she's there, if you do the math and look at this, she's there before Christmas. She gets there in early December, if all goes well. So I think one of the most exciting things about this was discovering a new family member that was so instrumental in this mission, in this journey. And she was the oldest of 3 children for Isaac and Elizabeth Elliott. On May 29th, she married Albert Hartsoff, who was a soldier and a physician. They had 3 children together, Albert, Luther, and Florence. Alice died on September 9th, 1919, at the age of 75.
Wow.
And perhaps she has left letters or a diary or a journal about this incredible trip with her family members. And thanks to Ancestry.com, we can trace those 3 children of hers back to the 1950 census. We don't get anything after 1950 because those haven't been released yet. But here's another opportunity for us to see if we can find another source to contact regarding letters, and hopefully a diary that just explores this amazing trip that this woman made 4 times. Now, just to mess with your mind, Elizabeth married Isaac Elliot, and this was Phineas's older sister that moved to St. Paul. Phineas's younger sister, Sally, also married Isaac Elliot. 2 Isaac Elliots. So when you go on Ancestry and look up Isaac Elliot with both of the Banning references, it's amazing the mess that comes up. It's just incredible. But it's a fun mess to search through. Now, I'm going to leave you today with fun facts that were uncovered that have no regards to the topic talked about today. I found them in the newspaper. They go, I got to share these. Okay, first one. Remember Mary Hollister coming back on the Montana?
Yeah.
Okay, Mary Hollister, if you remember through the books in our learning, went to the East Coast, and this is where she got the letter that said Phineas wanted to marry her. Remember? Remember that?
She was on the East Coast?
So she comes back, same way that Alice and the kids go, and comes back. Now, the steamer can't stop in San Luis Obispo, right? Can't stop in Wilmington. So it goes to San Francisco. She gets off of the Montana and gets on another ship called the Sierra Nevada. And the Sierra Nevada in August of 1868 crashes. It hits the rocks and the ship goes down. Everybody on the ship is forced to flee, get off the ship, and they were all rescued either from being on the rocks or in lifeboats. So think about this now. Mary Hollister and Rebecca both survived catastrophic shipping accidents and continued on in life. Rebecca with the Ada Hancock and Mary with the Sierra Nevada. The amazing thing about the Sierra Nevada, nobody was hurt, and the whole ship went down.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? Now, here's another fun one. These aren't on the test, by the way. A tsunami hit San Pedro and Wilmington, August 19th, 1868. A 9.3 earthquake hit Peru as Peru borders against Chile down the southern end of Peru. A 9.3.
That's a big one.
That is life-changing, right? A tsunami wave on the 13th, the earthquake hit the 13th, the tsunami hit 6 days later. So the waves hit Hawaii, Japan, Australia, and Wilmington. There's an account of this flow coming in and out of the bay here that nobody could understand what is happening. The rise in tide, the rolling of ships. So we had a tsunami. All right, another one. William H. Seward, and you remember him, he survived the assassination on the night Lincoln died as our Secretary of State. They tried to kill him, they got Lincoln. They tried to get our Vice President, what was his name?
Andrew Johnson.
Thank you, Lou.
And
He is on the steamer Orizaba, which was the one that went back and forth from San Francisco to Wilmington. On September 17th, 1869, the crowd at Wilmington was at the dock waiting for Seward to get off so they could welcome him and cheer him. He refused. He would not get off the ship, stayed on board, went to San Diego where he got off, and everybody was not happy. Okay. All right, 2 more to go. While Phineas was living alone, as we talked about in that one article, that article also states that the son of General Alexander at Drum Barracks had lent Phineas his son, and he was known as a major domo de la casa. And his name was Jonathan Alexander. So little Jonathan was here taking care of Phineas. That's all they said. Okay, last one. On April 7th, April to October, before our 6 months before the train is officially let loose and gonna change Los Angeles forever, the final stagecoach race took place of Banning and Tomlinson. And this happens on the 7th. It was quoted as a lively affair with much wagering taking place. The win went to Banning and Company, who beat Tomlinson by a few minutes. The LAS, it opened in 6 months later. So I had a lot of fun researching this, and this will get us going on another level of understanding, I think, Phineas. And the personal, just a second, Lori, the personal tragedy he went through, doing the best what he thought at the time to get the boys to survive this, be with family, and to get this railroad completed, must have just been a monumental stress and strain, but he had the foresight to get through all of this and get it completed. And this was a lot of fun to research and a lot of fun to share with you, and I thank you so much for having me.
Wow.
I hope you took good notes. Yes, Lou.
I have two questions.
Yes.
One is this earthquake down in Peru. Is that the one where the Spanish churches fell down and the Inca foundations didn't? And they said that proved the Inca gods were stronger than the Christian gods?
It could be. The article didn't say that. The article really was focused
Okay.
on the wave vibration, because this happened right on the coast.
Okay. And the other
Yes.
question is, you said that he found love 2 times before he
Yes.
So were those 2 different other women?
They didn't say, they only listed one name, and Tom Sitton has that in his book. So, there's
Okay.
no last name given, there's just a first name.
But it wasn't Mary.
It was not Mary.
Good for him.
Yeah. Yes.
Eligible bachelor.
Oh, good question, thank you, Lori.
Widower.
There is
What was question
Grosse,
you're not?
Grosse Pointe, Michigan, where Alice is buried, and her husband. And her daughter is also buried, right- anyway, on that Find a Grave website, they show everybody, but that's where she's at. She didn't leave Michigan. I mean, Minnesota. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Hope you worked up an appetite.
Yeah.
All right.
So he was eligible